June 3rd, 1944, 3 days before D-Day. Inside a nondescript brick building in Arlington, Virginia, a team of American codebreakers discovered something that would change the course of the war. German intelligence had no idea their most secure communication system had been compromised for over a year. What happened next would expose every Nazi spy in Britain, turn double agents into puppet masters, and feed Hitler false information so convincing that German tanks would wait for phantom armies that never came. The breaking of Enigma gets all the glory. Movies, documentaries, endless books about Bletchley Park and Alan Turing. But there was another code, one the Germans considered absolutely unbreakable, that American cryptanalysts shattered in ways that made Enigma look like a warm-up exercise. This is the story of how a handful of mathematicians, linguists, and chess players dismantled German intelligence without firing a single shot. The system was called the Enigma Abwehr variant. Not the standard Enigma used by German military forces, but a specialized version operated exclusively by the Abwehr, Hitler's military intelligence service. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, believed this system was impenetrable. He had every reason to think so. The machine used 4 rotors instead of 3, millions more possible settings than standard Enigma. The key settings changed daily using code books that were never transmitted over radio. Operators were trained to inject random letter groups into messages, making pattern analysis nearly impossible. Even if someone captured a machine, they would need the daily key settings, the operator procedures, and the specific rotor wirings unique to Abwehr models. German cryptographers had done the math. Breaking this system through brute force would require checking 159 quintillion possible rotor positions. That's 159 followed by 18 zeros. At 1 setting per second, it would take longer than the age of the universe to crack a single message. They were right about the math. What they didn't account for was human psychology. Arlington Hall, the former girls' school turned code-breaking facility, looked nothing like Bletchley Park's organized chaos. The Americans approached signals intelligence differently. While the British recruited mathematicians and engineers, the US Army's Signal Intelligence Service grabbed anyone who showed aptitude, regardless of background. High school teachers worked alongside concert pianists. Crossword puzzle champions sat next to librarians who could memorize entire card catalogues. Frank Rowlett led the team targeting Abwehr communications. A Kentucky math teacher before the war, Rowlett had helped break Japanese diplomatic codes in the 1930s. He understood something fundamental about encryption that pure mathematicians often missed. Every code system has 2 vulnerabilities, the mathematics and the humans using it. The breakthrough didn't come from attacking the encryption directly. It came from watching how German operators made mistakes. Rowlett's team noticed something strange in intercepted Abwehr messages during the summer of 1943. Certain phrases appeared at predictable positions. Weather reports always started messages from coastal stations. Agent identification codes followed standard formats. Most tellingly, lazy operators occasionally used sequential rotor positions like ABC or predictable patterns like their girlfriend's initials for initial settings. These weren't flaws in the machine, they were flaws in discipline. The team started building what they called cribs, educated guesses about message content based on context and operator habits. A message from Lisbon at 600 hours probably started with the weather report. A transmission from an agent in Britain likely contained the phrase, "nothing to report," because most spies had nothing interesting to observe most days. But knowing probable content wasn't enough. They needed a way to test millions of possible rotor positions against these cribs faster than humanly possible. That's where the bombshell innovation happened. Not the British bomb machines, which were electromechanical and relatively slow, but something uniquely American. In early 1944, engineers at Bell Labs in Manhattan began constructing what they called the electronic comparator. Unlike anything that existed in cryptanalysis, this device used vacuum tubes instead of mechanical relays, making it exponentially faster at testing rotor positions. It wasn't a computer in the modern sense, but it was close enough. By March 1944, the system was operational. Feed in a crib, let the comparator run through possibilities, and wait. Sometimes hours, sometimes days, but it worked. The first successful decrypt came on March 17th, 1944, a routine message from an Abwehr station in Madrid to Berlin. The content was mundane, administrative logistics about agent payments, but the implications were staggering. Within 6 weeks, Rolet's team was reading up to 40% of Abwehr traffic. Not every message, the system still required good cribs and some luck, but enough to piece together the entire structure of German intelligence operations in Western Europe. What they discovered was almost disappointing. The legendary Abwehr, Hitler's eyes and ears, was a bureaucratic disaster. Agents filed fabricated reports from pubs in Lisbon. Station chiefs inflated their spy networks with imaginary sources to justify their budgets. The few legitimate agents in Britain had all been captured and turned by MI5 within weeks of landing. German intelligence had no idea what was actually happening in England. None. The Americans now faced an extraordinary decision. They could use this information to simply arrest remaining Axis agents and shut down German intelligence networks. Or they could do something far more audacious. They could feed the beast, turning Germany's own intelligence system into a weapon aimed at Berlin. What happened next would require perfect coordination between American codebreakers, British counterintelligence, and captured German agents willing to betray their homeland. The operation would become the most elaborate deception in military history, and it all depended on the Germans never suspecting their unbreakable code had been shattered by a Kentucky math teacher and a roomful of crossword enthusiasts. The British called it Operation Fortitude. The Americans preferred double cross. Whatever the name, the concept was breathtaking in its audacity. Every German agent in Britain, all of them, had been captured, turned or invented wholesale. MI5 ran them like puppets, feeding carefully crafted lies back to Berlin through radio transmissions the Germans believed were genuine intelligence reports. But there was a problem. The Abwehr's Enigma traffic revealed something troubling. German intelligence officers were growing suspicious. Too many reports seemed convenient. Too much information arrived exactly when needed. Some desk analysts in Berlin were starting to ask uncomfortable questions about whether their spy networks had been compromised. The solution required surgical precision. Rowlett's team couldn't just read German messages. They needed to understand German psychology, anticipate German doubts, and craft deceptions that would survive scrutiny from paranoid intelligence professionals trained to suspect everything. Lieutenant Colonel John Grombach of Army Intelligence proposed something radical during a February 1944 planning session at the Pentagon. What if we let them catch us lying occasionally? Small lies, inconsequential fabrications that German intelligence could verify as false. If the Abwehr caught their agents making minor errors, they'd trust the major reports even more. The idea was brilliant because it violated every instinct about deception. Spies are supposed to be believable, but Grombach understood something deeper. Perfect intelligence is suspicious. Real spies make mistakes. They misidentify units. They report rumors as facts. They occasionally send complete nonsense because they're drunk or scared or just bad at their jobs. So the Allies started deliberately corrupting their deception feeds with verifiable errors. An imaginary agent in Dover reported seeing the 5th Infantry Division preparing for embarkation. German reconnaissance flights could verify no such division existed at that location. The agent was reprimanded in subsequent transmissions, told to be more careful. His next reports were treated with appropriate skepticism by Berlin, which meant his later completely fabricated intelligence about invasion preparations in Calais went into German intelligence estimates with exactly the credibility required. The Enigma decrypts revealed this was working. Abwehr officers in Berlin sent messages to field stations praising the quality of intelligence from Britain, while noting that agents occasionally made identification errors, which was normal and actually proved they weren't being fed information by British counterintelligence. German logic had defeated itself. By being suspicious enough to expect errors, they'd made themselves vulnerable to controlled errors that validated strategic lies. Meanwhile, Rolet's team discovered something that changed the entire operational picture. The Abwehr wasn't just running agents in Britain. They had extensive networks throughout neutral countries: Spain, Portugal, Sweden, Switzerland, and Turkey. Those stations handled communications with agents operating across Europe and even inside the Soviet Union. More importantly, they coordinated with other German intelligence services, the SD, military intelligence, and various SS security departments. The Enigma traffic contained references to operations, agent identities, and intelligence assessments from across Hitler's intelligence apparatus. This created an extraordinary opportunity. By reading Abwehr communications, the Americans gained insight into German knowledge about Allied invasion planning. They could see exactly what Berlin knew, what they suspected, and what they completely misunderstood. It was like playing poker while watching your opponent's cards reflected in a mirror behind them. The decrypts revealed that German intelligence had correctly identified some aspects of Allied invasion preparations. They knew massive forces were assembling in southern England. They'd observed increased aerial reconnaissance of French coastal defences. They understood an invasion was coming in 1944, but they had the location catastrophically wrong. Thanks to the double-cross system feeding them fabricated intelligence validated by their own Enigma communications, German high command believed the invasion would strike Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel. The entire 15th Army, Germany's strongest force in France, sat waiting near Calais for an invasion that would never come. The real target was Normandy, nearly 200 miles southwest. As D-Day approached, Rowlett's team worked around the clock monitoring German communications for any sign the deception was failing. Every decrypt was analysed for hints that Berlin suspected the truth. Every Abwehr message was scrutinised for evidence of German agents discovering actual invasion preparations in Portsmouth and Southampton. Nothing. The Germans remained convinced Calais was the objective. On June 5th, 1944, the night before the invasion, a decrypt arrived that made everyone in the Arlington Hall Situation Room hold their breath. An Abwehr message from their Madrid station to Berlin reported that a source had information about imminent Allied military action. The message was marked urgent. For 3 hours, no follow-up came. Had they been compromised? Did some German agent actually know about Normandy? If Berlin ordered reconnaissance flights or repositioned forces based on accurate intelligence, the invasion could become a bloodbath. Then the follow-up decrypt arrived. The Madrid station's urgent intelligence was about a suspected Allied operation against Norway. Completely wrong. Perfectly, beautifully wrong. At 6:30 hours on June 6th, American, British and Canadian forces stormed the beaches of Normandy. The German 15th Army, the force that could have turned the invasion into a disaster, remained near Calais waiting for the real invasion their intelligence services had predicted. They would stay there for 7 critical weeks while the Allies consolidated their beachhead, believing Normandy was a diversion. Even after the breakout began, Abwehr intelligence assessments, read in real time by Rowlett's team, insisted the main invasion force was still preparing to strike Calais. The Enigma's secret had achieved something unprecedented. It hadn't just protected information, it had weaponized the enemy's entire intelligence apparatus, turning their communication security into a transmission belt for lies they trusted more than truth. The intelligence advantage extended far beyond D-Day. Through summer and fall 1944, Rowlett's team watched German intelligence scramble to explain how their supposedly comprehensive network had missed the greatest military operation in history. The decrypts revealed internal investigations, recriminations, and desperate attempts to rebuild credibility with Berlin leadership, who were beginning to question everything their spies reported. What the Germans never discovered was that their communications security itself had become the weapon that defeated them. Every Abwehr station across Europe, every agent network from Lisbon to Istanbul, every intelligence assessment flowing through Enigma channels had been compromised not through betrayal or carelessness, but through mathematical brilliance applied in a former girls' school outside Washington. By late 1944, the Abwehr was in collapse. Admiral Canaris, who had led the organization since 1935, was dismissed in February 1944 following repeated intelligence failures. He was arrested in July after the failed assassination attempt on Hitler, then executed in April 1945 for alleged involvement in resistance activities. The Abwehr was absorbed into the SD, ending its independent existence. The Enigma decrypts documented this institutional death in real time. Messages grew increasingly desperate, contradictory, paranoid. Agents reported information they knew Berlin wanted to hear rather than actual intelligence. Stations blamed each other for failures. The entire apparatus had lost confidence in itself, corroded from within by the knowledge that nothing they reported seemed accurate anymore. They attributed their failures to Allied counterintelligence brilliance, to traitors within their ranks, to bad luck. Never to the possibility that their unbreakable cipher had been broken by a team of mathematicians, linguists, and clerks working in buildings that didn't officially exist. The security around this achievement was absolute. Fewer than 3,000 Americans knew the complete story of Enigma penetration during the war. Rowlett's team operated undercover so deep that families believed their relatives worked in boring administrative roles. The women who operated the bombs, processing thousands of messages daily, were told they were conducting statistical analysis for military planning. Even after Germany's surrender, the secret remained locked. British intelligence, which had broken Enigma first at Bletchley Park, insisted on continued silence. Enigma machines had been distributed to dozens of countries after the war, many still believing the system was secure. Those nations' communications remained readable throughout the late 1940s and 1950s. The full story didn't emerge until 1974, when Britain finally declassified the Bletchley Park operations. The American contribution, Rowlett's achievement in breaking the Abwehr variant, and building the industrial-scale decryption operation at Arlington Hall remained classified even longer. Many of the women who had worked there went to their graves never able to tell their families what they had actually done during the war. Frank Rowlett continued working in signals intelligence throughout the Cold War, contributing to the development of computer-based cryptanalysis. He received the National Security Medal in 1965 for contributions that remained classified for another decade. When asked late in life about his role in World War II, he consistently deflected credit to his team, particularly to the women whose mathematical work had made everything possible. The mathematical principles Rowlett and his team developed became foundational to modern cryptography. The recognition that machine ciphers required machine solutions, that statistical analysis could expose patterns invisible to human observation, that industrial-scale computation could solve problems previously considered impossible, all of these insights emerged from the pressure cooker environment of wartime codebreaking. The impact on the war itself is difficult to overstate. Military historians estimate that Enigma intelligence shortened the war in Europe by at least 2 years, possibly more. Every convoy that avoided U-boat wolf packs, every air raid that struck actual targets rather than decoys, every ground operation that exploited German weaknesses invisible to conventional reconnaissance, all benefited from intelligence derived from intercepted communications. The invasion of Normandy succeeded not just because of superior Allied forces or brilliant tactical planning, but because German commanders made decisions based on intelligence they trusted completely. Intelligence that had been systematically corrupted through the very communications systems designed to protect it. This represents perhaps the most profound irony of the Enigma story. The German military had invested enormous resources in communication security, correctly recognizing that modern warfare required secure command and control. They had created a cipher system that was genuinely sophisticated, requiring mathematical genius and unprecedented industrial effort to defeat. But security systems create their own vulnerability. The more a military trusts its communications, the more catastrophic the consequences when those communications are compromised. The Germans never developed adequate procedures to verify intelligence or cross-check sources precisely because they believed Enigma made such precautions unnecessary. The Allies exploited this overconfidence ruthlessly. They didn't just read German messages, they shaped them, influenced them, weaponized them. The double-cross system fed false intelligence that German commanders trusted because it arrived through channels they believed were secure. By the time Rowlett's team shut down their Enigma operation in May 1945, they had processed over 400,000 German military communications. Each decrypt had been analysed, cross-referenced, and distributed to commanders who used it to make decisions that saved Allied lives and shortened the war. The last Abwehr Enigma message, intercepted on May 8, 1945, was anticlimactic. a routine administrative communication about personnel transfers. It was processed, filed, and forgotten. The machines were packed away, the bombs were disassembled, the buildings at Arlington Hall returned to their cover identities, and several thousand people who had changed the course of history went back to lives where they could never explain what they had actually accomplished. The thunder of their achievement would remain silent for 3 decades. The final irony is that German cryptographers were right about the mathematics. Breaking Enigma through pure calculation was impossible. What they never considered was that impossibility could be bypassed by understanding the humans behind the machines. Lazy operators, predictable phrases, bureaucratic routines, these weren't flaws in the cipher. They were flaws in human nature, and human nature doesn't improve just because you're using sophisticated equipment. Frank Rowlett and his team didn't defeat German engineering. They defeated German assumptions about what was possible. While Berlin's mathematicians proved their system was unbreakable, Kentucky math teachers and crossword enthusiasts broke it anyway. Not through superior mathematics, but through superior psychology combined with industrial-scale persistence. The lesson transcends cryptography. The most sophisticated security system in the world fails if the people using it don't maintain discipline. The Germans trusted their machines more than they questioned their procedures, and that trust became the very mechanism of their defeat. Somewhere in the archives at Fort Meade, the successor to Arlington Hall, those 400,000 decrypted messages still exist. Mundane reports about weather and logistics, strategic assessments that were catastrophically wrong, desperate final transmissions as the Third Reich collapsed. Each one represents a small victory in a war won not on battlefields, but in the invisible spaces between transmission and reception where mathematics met human error and exploitation became an art form. The codebreakers never fired a shot. They didn't need to. They'd already won the war by making Germany's most secure system into a weapon aimed at Berlin itself.